Hey everybody, welcome to the Daniel Davis Deep Dive Christmas edition. I didn't plan on doing a show today, but there was some information that came out overnight and I thought you deserve to know about it. And that is that Zelensky's 20-point peace plan, his counter to Trump's 28-point peace plan, has now been revealed. He actually revealed it overnight. You can see here the Kiev Independent. Zelensky reveals the full 20-point peace plan drafted, backed by Ukraine and US, which is interesting because you remember that the Russian 28-point peace plan was also rumored to have been drafted in the cooperation with Moscow. I'm going to go through all these details here today, and you can see a bunch of them passing by on the screen. You know, I don't try to talk you into buying gold or tell you how to run your stock portfolio, but there is a way you can help us. Subscribe, hit that like button, and share this with somebody you love. I want to point out, this is not something we're like, okay, this is all bad. It's completely dumb. It'll never happen. But there are some big problems with it. So first of all, I want to look at there is some room for hope because some of the points in here are some things that both sides could agree to. A lot's going to depend on definitions, but it is possible. And there's more things on here that are possible than are not. The ones that are not, though, are deal breakers. We'll get to that in a second. I want to look here, first of all, at the things in the agreement where there is room for cooperation and there is room for, hey, we might be able to agree on these points. Then we're going to look at the ones from the Russian side, which are complete non-starters that they would never agree to, and those are going to have to be resolved. And then there's I think there's 3 points I put on here that are not mentioned at all, which are also deal breakers for the Russian side, which would have to be included or we're not going to get anywhere. So with that, let's jump right in. First of all, let's start off with point number 1. It says Ukraine. These are the ones that actually have room for implementation. Both sides can generally agree to these terms going in, and then the hard work is going to be nailing out something, the exact language that each side can agree to. But it's good news because there's a whole lot more of these than there are of the other categories. First of all, Ukraine will end up being a sovereign state. Russia agrees to that. Obviously, Ukraine wants that. A non-aggression term peace agreement would be part of this between Russia and Ukraine. Both sides agree to that as well. Neither side wants to worry about having a war. Both sides say once this is over with, they don't want to have to worry about the next war. The definitions are important again, but that is an outcome that both sides agree to. Security guarantees. Depends on the definitions of security guarantees. From the Russian side, that means our security also has to be guaranteed. And so far, the West has only been talking about guarantees against Russia for Ukraine. So that would have to be pretty much, I almost put that one in the other category, but at least categorically, the Russians have said security guarantees as a title is something that they're interested in. Point number 7, EU membership. That's something also that Putin has said, even in recent months, they can live with that. They can go with that. They're somewhat concerned about that because the EU has kind of become an armed operation instead of just an economic one that it used to be. But they can probably live with that, again, depending on the terms. Now, I'm not so sure that was good for the European Union. I'm not so sure that they actually want Ukraine, which was already prior to this war the most corrupt country in all of Europe. And of course, it's only been put on hyperdrive now, and it's as bad as it can even be imagined, like on levels that was in the Afghan war, which was horrific. So I'm not sure that that's something that Europeans will want. We'll see how eager they are once this thing gets resolved. If they actually go through with that, I'll be surprised if they do. Color me skeptical. Number 8, global development package. Now, this is something that's talking about reconstruction, etc. Russia's fine with that. They're not going to pay for anything that's on the Ukraine side of the line, wherever the border ends up being. You can be sure of that. Now, if European countries and other countries around the world want to sign up to it, Russia's fine with that. It gets a little more dicey in the next one, number 9, $800 billion in reconstruction. Again, Russia's like, hey, good on you guys. Have at it. If you want to come up with $800 billion, that's the initial estimate for how much it would cost to rebuild the Ukraine side of that line. Russia is going to take care of what's on its side because it considers that Russian territory. It's already done it in Mariupol and several other places, and it will just continue on with that. So Russia's like, we're already going to handle it on our side. You can do what you want on your side. But man, $800 billion, because that's the specific number specified. Who's going to pay that? I mean, you saw how hard it was for the European Union to come up with $45 billion in 2027 and another $45 billion for 2028. Where are you going to get almost 10 times that amount? Over what period of time? It wasn't specified in what was released here anyway, but it doesn't matter. That number is just gargantuan. I don't know where anybody's going to do that on top of their own economic needs, on top of their own trying to move up to 5% GDP. I don't see it, but Russia's probably willing to sign that. If you guys want to sign it for $800 billion, more power to you. Number 10, point number 10, a free trade agreement with the U.S. Good luck on getting those terms for Ukraine. Again, Russia's like, hey, y'all want to do a free trade agreement? That's between you. Don't really care about that. But just beware, Ukraine. You'll be in as weak a position as it's even possible on the other side of this. And good luck getting some good terms from the United States, because especially with President Trump right now, he will extort everything he can and maximize, and then with written documents put in a long time, it's going to be hard to get out of later. So I caution you about signing anything on a free trade agreement. Non-nuclear status for Ukraine. That's something that Russia absolutely desires and is important to them. So that's an easy one. Number 13, each side teaches tolerance to the other side. This is an interesting one. This is something that Russia has been wanting for a long time. It's actually part of the things that they're interested in, but everything will depend on the curriculum. Who's teaching what to whom, and on which side of the line are we talking about? Those are things that are generally something that Russia's interested in, and the Ukraine side says they are too, so that's good, depending on what's taught and to whom and by whom. Point number 15, refrain from using force to settle disputes. That's like, well, yeah, I mean, that's kind of self-evident that you would, but the term chosen there, the specific word, at least in the English translation on the Kiev newspaper there, refrain from using. Well, that's kind of an existing situation anyway. That's in the UN Charter. That's what every nation tries to do. And it kind of harkens back to the Budapest Memorandum of 1994 that so many in the West don't like because it didn't have enforcement mechanisms. And when you say refrain, that doesn't mean stop. That doesn't mean there's Article 5 guarantees. We're going to get to that in a second. So sure, I'll agree to refrain from doing it unless the conditions are changed. And I'm sure that'll be the same thing on the Ukraine side. Number 16, Russia won't stop Dnipro access to the sea for Ukraine. This is a conditional one. Russia will agree to this as long as other conditions also exist. I'll get to those in just a second. But if those conditions don't exist, probably the answer is no. And right now, I think that there's a legitimate and significant interest within Russia to deny access to the sea. And if things continue ongoing in this tanker war and other attacks on Russian infrastructure, that's probably going to gain some speed. Everything depends on what happens in the coming months, probably, about whether there'll be an agreement that everybody can agree to. Number 17, prisoner swaps, an all-for-all deal. Everybody agrees to that. That one's also easy. Number 18, presidential elections. This is the Ukraine side. Russia has already asked for that. The United States has asked for that. So everybody agrees to the concept of a presidential election. A lot of things are going to depend on how it's done, but that's not in the very hard category. Number 19, legally binding. Russia is all for this too. They want something that's going to go through the U.S. Congress, for example, and many of the things that they're talking about. They want something that's going to go through the Rada. They are willing to go through their own Duma. So that's something that everybody agrees to. Whatever the end up of this, I think all sides actually want a legally binding agreement. And then the last point is just that the ceasefire will take effect once an agreement is. That's actually exactly Russia's position. That's exactly what they've been saying and are still saying to this day, is that they're not going to do a ceasefire until there's actually an agreement in place. So they're all for that one. So there's a number of these points on here you can see that are easy. Some are a little bit more contentious, but there's a number of them and quite a bit more number numerically that are thought. So there is something here to work out with. So this is not all bad news. In terms of diplomacy, I think this does represent a step forward, that a lot of these came from the Ukraine side. But as I said at the beginning, not just that the devil's in the details, but that definitions are massively important. So it depends on how even some of these on the positive side are going to be defined as to how it's going to be done. So bottom line is, this is something that's going to be difficult and tortuous, even to get agreement on from both sides on this one. That's going to be really difficult. Just guarantee this is going to be taking place in months, unless there's a collapse of the front by the Ukraine side. So this is not something that's going to be settled quickly, but it is a step forward. However, there are at least 4 points in here that are complete non-starters from the Russian side. Let's look at those. Number 4, the first one, 800,000 for the UAF, Ukrainian Armed Forces. Okay, there's no way Russia's ever going to agree to a force that's nearly 4 times bigger than the one that existed on 24 February 2022. There's just no way. The whole thing about Russia, everything has always been about providing security on its western flank. And the last thing they're going to do is agree to something that has 4 times the number of forces, like more than triple bigger than any other armed force in all of Europe on their border. So that number is a non-starter. Remember, demilitarization were part of the terms that Putin says that they want, that he listed in his June 2024 speech. And 800,000 isn't quite reaching that threshold. So complete non-starter on that. Number 5, U.S. and NATO and EU backed Article 5 like guarantees. Zero chance of that. There's absolutely no chance that Russia is going to agree to a NATO or U.S. or European countries providing some kind of Article 5 type guarantees. That's, again, part of what Russia says was their root causes of this war, and they will fight until those are taken care of. They will not agree to anything that's going to leave a viable external lifeline into Ukraine from the West and NATO specifically. So no chance of that. Point number 12, the Zaporizhia nuclear power plant says that each side will own 1/3 of it, et cetera. That's a non-starter. Russia is not going to agree to that. Although of the 4 points on the non-negotiable side, that's probably the weakest. And depending on how things might be negotiated, there might be some room for compromise on that on the Russian side. But they're not going to just hand that over to the Ukraine side without getting something significant in return. Point number 14 is also one that's a complete non-starter, and that is that the line of contact is the line of demarcation. So wherever the line is now, and that includes the Donbass, Zaporizhia, Kherson, that's just where it's going to be. Interesting enough that it's not mentioned in here about the territory, at least not that I've seen so far, in Sumy, in Kharkiv, in Dnipropetrovsk, et cetera. I think I've seen some headlines that the Ukraine side wants those withdrawn as well. But I didn't see that, at least not in this 20-point plan that was released this morning. We'll keep a follow on that. But there's no way that Russia's going to agree to that, because Putin said just in a couple of days ago, he specified that the Russian Federation includes the Donbass, Crimea, and several other places too. So that's already in their constitution. All 4 of these regions that they say that they have to have, that they annexed in 2022, are incontrovertibly part of the Russian constitution and Russian territory, the administrative borders, because they specified the administrative borders that existed in 1991. So there is no way that Russia is going to compromise on that. Putin can't. That's something that is so high of an ask, and there's no leverage on the Western side and the Ukraine side to demand that he does. That's just hard truth right there. So those are the 4 points that are pretty much non-negotiable out of these 20. Then there are 3 points that are not in here, which are also major problems that are non-negotiables for the Russian side as well, that must be included or there won't be a deal. Number 1 is there is no mention about neutrality, non-aligned status, and nothing about NATO membership. There has to be an explicit denunciation of NATO. There has to be, we will be neutral and non-aligned. That's a non-negotiable that Putin has said from 2024 all the way through. Actually, I think even back into the Istanbul in 2022. He said that's just non-negotiable, because that is the security as Russia sees it on their western flank. And they're simply not going to agree to anything that has even the possibility of NATO membership later. That was one of the literal core reasons why they went to war in the first place. So the fact that that's not mentioned means that there's no chance that this version as it is continue on. Second thing, there's no mention of any denazification. There is something about an election, and that could potentially get in there depending on how this election is done. But one of the things that Russia said was that they wanted the denazification of the mentality that led to this attack. And they're not talking about 2022. They're attacking to 2022. They're talking about to 2014 in the coup and all that stuff, that everything that upended this, that is from the Russian perspective, that's where this war started, not in 2022. So the fact that there is literal no mention of denazification means that it's a non-starter for Russia. The fact that it's not in the 20-point plan means that Russia will say this is not a realistic document. One other thing is that it says there is no mention of any constitutional adjustments for the ethnic Russians that will be living inside of whatever's left of Ukraine. So right now, for example, if the 4 oblasts were agreed to, well, that would still leave millions of Russians, in especially in some of the what will then be the western regions of Ukraine, that will need protection as much as the ones in the Donbass area, for example. That was going back to the Minsk agreements. That was one of the things that Putin said in that 2019, that famous or infamous meeting between Putin, Zelensky, Merkel from Germany, and Emmanuel Macron from France. Putin's speech in that conference, you can go back and look at it. He specified there would have to be constitutional adjustments to prepare for preserve the rights of the Russian-speaking people inside of Ukraine. That was what was agreed to by Ukraine and guaranteed by the European Union. It was agreed to by the Donbass authorities at the time and by the Russian Federation, guaranteed by the Russian Federation. So they said, yeah, that's something that's non-negotiable back then. It's something that they've been saying all along was necessary, June 2024, and he's still saying to this day. So until that is included in some kind of an firm agreement and there's some kind of enforcement mechanisms for all of this, we're not going to get anywhere. So the bottom line is that there's a lot of points, at least numerically, there's something to work with here. So we got to take the good where we can. This is Christmas after all. So let's accept this as a gift, that it's better than if Zelensky had just repudiated the 28-point peace plan of Trump. They came up with something else, and it does have something to work with. So I haven't seen any reaction yet from the Russian side. I would wager that they would say there's some guarded optimism. They rarely take this hard stance on just something categorically. I think that they will be saying, yeah, we can work with these things. There's some other things that have to change. We'll see what they do say. But I suspect, based on what we've seen over the last 11 years or so, I think that Russia says there is some work here, but definitions are going to matter on these points that are in agreement. And then there's also other things that have to be added. And then some things are going to have to be completely changed, or there's not going to be a deal. So bottom line is that there is a chance here that something good could happen. At least there's the chance that we're on a better path than we were. And anytime you get an end of war negotiation, it's going to be long and torturous, and everything will always depend, as I keep saying over and over, and definitely applies here, is it depends on when one side has calculated that fighting is no longer going to be a viable path for them to get anything. And when they recognize that if we keep going down this path, we could lose everything, then, and probably only then, will you finally get to the point to where you'll start making some hard concessions on things that you don't want to or even hate, because that is still less bad than losing everything. And I think that's where we are. Thank you very much, folks. I appreciate your time. And we will get back to you right after Christmas with your normal shows from the Daniel Davis Deep Dive. We wish you all a great, joyous, and happy day with family and friends. And we look forward to seeing you on Friday. See you then.